started.
All right, Ike and Linus and Maddi and Jenna and our good friend Steve Francis. Holy moly, it is a full house. For those who aren't watching on YouTube, first of all, maybe you should. It's worth a look at all these folks, but it does look a little bit like Steve Francis and I are hosting a dating game or something as we have as everybody coupled up here, and it's great. Liza is in the room with me, but is not on the podcast. That maxes out our quota. We can't have that many people all talking at the same time. So the reason, of course, that we have gathered this esteemed group together is, of course, to talk about your most recent adventure through the desert over this former holiday season.
Is this a winter breakdown?
It might be. We use that term liberally, much like Miracle Whip is considered a mayonnaise. I think whatever. So, yeah, sure. In this case, I think there probably were a couple breakdowns. I don't know, because I've actually, I try to avoid information about these trips until these shows, so as
it's a surprise.
I can be surprised. Yeah, that's exactly right. So,
well, the surprise is we didn't go. Bye, everyone.
Stayed home and watched the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film, the sequel, Secrets of the Ooze, and that was it. That was Christmas. So the worst Christmas ever. Steve, first of all, welcome to the show. Long time we've wanted you on. No better reason than today. Of course, we talked about you heavily during your pit crew assistance of Jenna and Liza up there at your home, getting the Dream Machine ready to go rally through the desert. So appreciate that, and of course your frequent participation in Ike and Linus Almost Get Killed in the Desert Adventures.
Well, thanks for having me.
Welcome. And Maddi, welcome. Minnie said, when Linus said, my girlfriend Maddi, it was a sort of my girlfriend in Canada kind of situation. She lives in the next town over. You wouldn't know her.
Mm-hmm. I do, in fact, go to a different school.
She does.
Well, there you go. Yeah, but are in fact real and are in not just the same room with Linus, but sharing a set of earbuds, one of the most intimate acts that a couple can engage in. So, and they're not your earbuds at all. They came from a neighbor. So that's
we pulled them out of the trash.
Yeah, it's some weird stuff going on over there. You guys are into some weird stuff. So yeah, well, welcome, Maddi. Thanks for joining the show and regaling us with tales of your desert adventures. So at that, Ike, what was this adventure? What was the plan? And how did you guys get started?
So there we were. No, every adventure starts, by leaving. And so it's often hard for us to leave because there's lots of preparations for taking old vehicles into remote areas, and we try to live it up when we're there. So we have lots of supplies, lots of food items, lots of meal planning, lots of planning for potential breakdowns, planning for various activities that we might do. Are we going to go into a mine? Do we need lights? How are we gonna film it? What do we need to bring for that? So there's a whole list of things that we need to bring, and we should do a little video for our Patreons about the trip preparation. That's its whole own story. But
I think most people, before they embark on a Christmas or holiday trip, ask themselves, are we going to go into any mines?
Dark places, perhaps?
Yeah, I think that's
it's interesting you mentioned that, because for our listeners that don't know, this group annually takes a trip in old Land Rovers somewhere. And sometimes that's Baja, and sometimes it's Death Valley, sometimes it's Eastern Oregon, but frequently it's Death Valley and Nevada area. And our friend Steve has come on a couple of these trips, and I don't know why exactly, having been on one, he keeps
comes back.
It's a mystery to me too. I don't know what I'm doing here right now.
It's kind of like watching that Jackass show for him. Only he gets to be there in person.
He is the Steve-O of desert.
No, we are the Steve-O.
You are the audience. That's right.
We love having him come visit us, and sometimes he can stay longer. This year it was only for a few days, but he brought his newly imported Defender 110 wagon.
Right.
And we all had old series Land Rovers, so he was showing us all how it should be done, and we were admiring all of his.
Yeah, I felt like the odd man out, but I brought enough spare parts to where I felt like I was bringing an old Land Rover again. And
right, just a bag full of those little plastic clips.
I brought a whole new dash,
of light bulbs.
a whole new dash. It was,
we did spend part of one evening working on his car, so I felt like it was acceptable to have him in the group. That's pretty traditional.
And was that solving for damage that the U.S. border guard caused, looking for the drugs in between the single sheets of aluminum inside of his car?
If they looked for drugs inside the clutch slave cylinder,
yes.
But
maybe.
But no, we weren't fixing that damage. But I do get to see that damage every single time I open the driver's door and look at the floor, because someone doesn't know how to use an angle grinder.
Yeah, the U.S. border guard is known, for their sort of like free-range metal sculpture work that they sort of do as a hobby project on the side.
So I had seen this damage on his car, and I was just absolutely dumbfounded that there is a customs agent that would do that. So if you're familiar with the floor of a Defender, it's completely flat. And if you look under the vehicle, you can see the bottom side of the floor panel. Mm-hmm. So this particular agent thought, I'm assuming, that there was something hidden under the floorboard, some sort of contraband. And so they decided they were not gonna unscrew the floor. They were just gonna cut the fasteners off to see the other side of this panel, and there was clearly nothing there.
And of course, it's the ground. Yeah, and, their feet very likely is what they saw. So
I wish it was filmed. It was filmed, but they removed the floor to look underneath it, and they ground into the floor. Not only were they an idiot, they were not very skilled.
Yeah, they managed to get about 80% of the fasteners off, but it was that last 20% that they just went to town on with an angle grinder.
Just gave up.
I have no, and and then just and kept going too. It went all through the aluminum into the actual sill panel.
Until you hit pay dirt, until you get a little puff of cocaine out of there, then you've done
This is a really nice original Defender, and it's all original paint. And this person just
went to town on it.
Floor.
Yeah.
Oh. And they probably made you pay for the trouble of doing it.
Yeah, they probably did charge me a little extra for the grinding disc, though. And then nicely they left all the fasteners just sitting on the ground too. So when I came up to the truck and there were no floors in the truck, I went, this is really strange. And I was like, where are all the fasteners? And I looked on the ground, and they're just all over the ground, and it was wet in the rain. It's like, they just left them on the ground. At least they didn't. Yeah.
Did they cut both floors out?
Yeah, but they only had to cut on the driver's side.
They didn't realize after removing one that they could just look under the car.
I think there are lots of questions here, Linus, that maybe just will remain unanswered.
So, while I was on the phone today, on hold with Customs and Border Protection in a very, very separate matter, a recording kept playing that said, if you want to file a complaint or a compliment to visit this particular website, and I'll send you the link for that, Steve.
Deal.
Have they ever gotten a compliment on that line? I wonder if that's ever happened. I thought you were going to say, I can actually hear grinding noise in the background.
So back to the trip. This year's trip, same time. So we usually do this like Christmas through New Year's sort of trip. And this year we did a loop through Nevada, visited several ghost towns and hot springs in Nevada. Mm-hmm. That was kind of the MO. And then we went into Saline Valley, which is part of Death Valley National Park.
And this, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of this route revisited some of the rebel locations from this year's rally. Is that true?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So we planned to, when we were on the rally, Liza and I just, it was
a competition. We were timed, and so there was a lot of cool stuff. We passed by, we saw it, or we stopped briefly, but we didn't really have the time to like poke at stuff with sticks and really explore and tromp around and see everything. I was hoping if the weather worked out, that we would be able to go see a bunch of those spots that we didn't get to stop at, and so we kind of planned the route accordingly. And I brought all the mapping, like I mapped them all on my phone before we left, so we could retrace some of the trails that we drove, assuming again that they weren't totally covered in snow. And but it was a bit of a, we were just gonna have to play it by ear, depending on what the weather was like, as to how many of those spots we would get to go see.
I saw some great recreation of classic Rebelle shots of the Dream Machine with three very not rally looking Land Rovers in there. So it's a very very cool. Very cool. And Ike. And like 100% more Ike than the rally would allow.
That's a hideous woman down there.
Like, who is that? Oh my God.
So I think this is like the third or fourth trip that Steve has come to visit us on. And this is Maddi's second trip. And so I was really surprised that you returned this year.
Yeah.
I think that
not by choice.
If we ever break up, she's going to take my place. And I just won't get to go anymore.
I think in all things, Linus, that's true. I think unanimously, that seems to be, it makes sense.
I mean, the only bummer is I can't play banjo. But they
that's not a bummer.
Like
that's really good.
I don't think that's a bummer at all. Yeah, no, that's a plus. That's one of the big reasons that we would pick you over Linus.
Yeah.
I think that's okay that you don't play the banjo. If you both played the banjo, that would be creepy.
You would never get invited anywhere if you both played the banjo. That's for sure. Yeah,
that's kind of like how Jenna and I always whistle together. If Maddi and I whistled together, we would definitely never get invited anywhere.
It's fine cross couple.
People forget that Jenna and I whistle when we're together. So So I was just trying to think of what trips Steve has come on. I know another Saline Valley trip. I know our Black Rock trip. What other one?
Previous Death Valley
trip. So that's 3. He brought his Series 1 yellow pickup on a previous Death Valley trip. I think he met us like Cerro Gordo area somewhere in there, or at least he drove up to Cerro Gordo with us. For those of you that are not familiar, Cerro Gordo is a kind of a ghost town. It's an old mine that's in the Death Valley area, and there's a great YouTube channel. I think it's Living in a Ghost Town. Does that sound right, Linus? About Cerro Gordo.
Ghost Town Living, something.
Ghost Town Living, I think that's right. Ghost Town Living.
Ghost Town Living. So check that out if you haven't seen it, just to get a sense of that area. And he does a lot of various hikes and adventures out into the valley there that are pretty cool, some of which we've done, some of which we have yet to do. But that's kind of
he's he's a risk-taking explorer. He has hiked down from the summit of the salt tram to the bottom of Saline Valley, and I've heard that it was a dangerous trip for him. And he has a mine, obviously, at the ghost town of Cerro Gordo. I think it's over 900 feet deep, and they have multiple levels, and they have a huge winch that lowers a cage that you can ride down. And there's one level that had been abandoned for a long time because it was dangerous, and he decided to explore it. And they went in there, and it was collapsing around them as they were getting out, and he was pulling the person behind him. And he said that nobody is ever going to go in that level again. It was very dangerous. So he has gone into some very dangerous places, and he's got it all on his YouTube. It's pretty exciting, to watch. He's got a lot of neat things to do up there, but much more risk-taking than I would be willing to do.
That trip down to Saline Valley was the time when I was driving home back to Reno, that I, right around Mono Lake, and I think it was around like midnight or 1 a.m, went over a big bump. The headlights dimmed, and then I started to smell burning. And immediately pulled over. It's like right next to Mono Lake, and it was just freezing cold. It was in December or January. And I turn on a headlamp because there's clearly no light in there, and there is just smoke billowing out of behind the gauge cluster. And for some reason in my panic, I didn't think to just disconnect the battery. I thought I need to get behind the gauge cluster. So I got out a flathead and started taking out those screws as fast as I could while there's just smoke just billowing out of the So by the time I got it out, then I realized
how many screws did you remove before you realized you were having a stroke?
I think I removed all of them before I realized that I should disconnect the battery. so I got the gauge that's still just sizzling with wires. There was actually a little bit of flame going, so I ran around the side and took the battery out. And then I couldn't, it was the middle of the night and all of the wires are the same color in that truck. So I had really no idea. There was just big cooked ones. But I figured out it was headlight related. So I just ended up sleeping in the cab of that Series 1 pickup truck it was freezing cold with my little dog Max all night long. And I did figure out that if you sleep in a Series 1 in a pickup, it's better to sleep with your head on it's a left-hand drive truck, but better sleep with your head on the side of the wheel because you get a lot more leg room. But that also took me half the night to figure out. I'm just going back and forth in the sleeping bag, freezing my ass off. So anyway, come morning, I drove it home without the headlights on and made it back and then fixed this absolute mess of wiring.
And it's still sitting.
And the truck is still sitting in Mono Valley, Mono Lake,
And that was the last time anybody ever saw that car. I'm surprised you didn't try to drive it home by just the headlamp.
I thought about
just
it.
turn off the headlight.
It's probably
just
brighter.
the headlamp out the windshield.
It's probably brighter.
Well, that's an excellent segue into how was the weather? Obviously, at the tail end, we're going through that right now here in California. We're getting atmospheric rivers and bomb cyclones and storm parades and stormtrooper rainstorms and stabby knife whatever wind things and all kinds of different action words in front of regular weather words. How was the weather for you guys?
It varied quite a bit. Death Valley is an area with significant elevation changes. And so throughout that range, it can be pretty drastically different. We encountered snow. So there's some pretty deep snow in places. We crossed some passes and found some snow and we got stuck and we did some winching. Yeah, in Nevada especially. And then when we went down into Death Valley and got to lower elevations, it was downright balmy. It was like t-shirt weather. It was super nice and sun shining. And then we encountered like a big windstorm that blew all these hippies' tents out into the desert, which was pretty entertaining. And it does vary pretty drastically, and you have to be prepared for all different types of weather conditions, precipitation. It rained on us, it snowed on us, it blew, sand, and debris. It's pretty
on the whole though, it was really good. I think we could have been much more unlucky and been hit with a real storm. These were mostly light rains and light snows and one wind storm, but it could have been really bad. We got
notifications in the brief moments when we would have service from time to time that we were in a pocket of okay and the whole world around us was in a storm. So we were getting texts like, oh, there's an ice storm in Eugene right now, and we're like, oh, well, hope everything's okay.
Right.
And then the huge storm up in the Sierras that was before we left that only really affected our ability to get home because 120 miles of Highway 395 was closed and we had to go detour around it. But
I think, we've been going to Death Valley for a long time. I think my first trip was 1991, but I've been going on my own in a Land Rover since 2004. And I think, we've been lucky so many times. I think probably we've had two windstorms, maybe three. In Saline Valley, I've gotten snow once. I've never gotten stuck out there. We've been very lucky. And this year was another good year. So maybe someday we'll get stuck out there, but
and that's where you'll die.
So speaking of stuck, we ran into a fellow traveler that was stuck. So they had a newer transit van. I don't know if it was brand new or like slightly used, but it was very new. 4-wheel drive transit van that had been lifted with larger tires and wheels, and it was set up as a camper. And there was a couple in this van, and they had recently purchased a lift and just had it installed. And this was the maiden voyage, let's go to Saline Valley trip.
Sure.
And so they had spent some time driving some of the remote roads in the area there, and they got to a point down across from the salt tram, and they were turning around, and the steering arm on the knuckle, which is part of the lift that they purchased, sheared off. It broke completely off at the weld, and so they were stranded there. And we kind of received word from people who had passed them that they had been stuck there for 3 days. And the park host he has service and at his little spot there, and he called the towing company, and they quoted him between $5,500 and $6,000 to tow it out of that area, which is pretty expensive, but it's a pretty remote area, and it would take a larger 4-wheel drive tow truck to do that. And he was asking around, can someone weld this steering knuckle back together? He's like, we could take it apart, and or maybe he has it apart, but we need somebody that can weld it together. There is an old welder in the maintenance area at Saline Valley.
Wow.
It's really old. It's more like a forge.
It's like you're in like some kind of massive scale escape room or something. Like, there was also a code that we had to enter by looking through these old newspaper. Like,
Basically.
Yeah, so it's a super old piece of equipment, and it has a generator attached to it, and the generator is equally old, like it's a World War II vintage design Kohler generator attached to like maybe early 70s or late 60s Lincoln welder with a
like BuzzBox style stick welder.
So it looked like it could be functional, and he said that yes, in fact, it could be made to work. But we looked at it, and the leads are all frayed, and all the grounds are corroded, and it looked like it hadn't been used in quite a while. The gas smelled really old. You want
to describe briefly the setting in which this welder is also taking place?
The setting, okay, so the maintenance area is maybe a generous term for this. It's a pile of scrap metal and old tools that exists in Saline Valley. And it's really only used in, for emergencies. Like if someone's stuck in Saline Valley, it's used for that. It's kind of an area that's grandfathered in. The Park Service would rather not maybe have it totally there. But it's really important that it be there because it is a remote area and people can get stranded there. And if they don't have supplies, it can get serious. So these folks were stuck for 3 days. I'm sure you could get stuck for much longer than that. And people have, have been there for weeks at a time. We managed to get the welder working with the help of some of the old desert regulars. Lizard Lee is one of those folks. He kind of gave us the rundown on its operation. And you've got to, hold your breath and bite your tongue and spray some starting fluid in it and remove the air cleaner, pull it twice and then pull it once real good. Like there's a whole procedure to getting it going. And Linus and Maddi and Jenna went in a pickup truck that they borrowed to pick up the parts from the person that was stranded. And it's, it doesn't seem that far away because it's, only
can see it
by the as the crow flies, it's maybe only a few miles, but it takes like an hour and 15 minutes from the campsite over, really rough roads to get there. And so they went and got the parts while I, finished, getting the welder running and cleaning up the leads and finding, a welding helmet, which was half burned. It was like sort of a Phantom of the Opera situation where like half of it's burned. It was like out of a horror movie. And so we got that going. And then the next stage is to like practice with the welder on some scrap material to see
Yeah,
if we
for
can
sure.
get not only it to function well and have a consistent arc, but also find some rod that's usable. They had some rod in an old refrigerator, but
No, well, of
half
course,
of
yeah.
it's good and half of it's bad, and
Yeah.
they have like all different types of welding rod if you're not familiar with stick welders, and some is good and some is not good for a particular application. So finding some welding rod that would work and making sure that it would run a consistent bead. So while they were doing that, I was getting the welder dialed in, and so by the time they got back with the parts, I was ready to weld it. But then we had to prepare it. So they had an angle grinder there. We used that to grind all the fancy powder coating off. This part, which is made by a company called Weld Tech, believe it or not, was welded on there very superficially, like very tidy TIG welds covered in powder coating. So it looked really nice, but very little penetration,
Very little
and not
penetration,
very strong. So
And the finishing and fitting of the pieces together below the weld was very bad. So you know when it was broken apart, and you could see how the gusset fit against the part. It was welded on there, and the weld was just covering the huge gaps between the gusset and the part. So it was very, very rushed in the.
And it was a cast part, or it was
just
a
plate
it was
steel.
a bunch of
plates,
fabricated plate.
Okay.
And so basically it looked like this company had a laser cutter that did like one thickness of material, and then they cut it all out like a paper doll, and then they welded it together in laminated sections to make the thicker areas.
Which by itself, well, laminating, I don't know, which by itself, is reasonable. I mean, certainly there are, very high end applications that things are made out of very lightened plate sort of things. Doesn't sound like this is one of those cases.
If they had welded well, it might have worked.
It might have
There
worked,
were big gaps between the laminations.
Well, perhaps all they had was a desert stick welder run off an old generator.
No,
we don't know.
It was so tidy. Like whoever TIG welded it did
was
a very
very
neat, tidy job.
They were more focused on making their Instagram welding video than doing
it's not like it's an important part.
Welding it. No, it's just a steering arm. It's fine. Yeah.
And for those listeners that don't know, the steering arm is critical to steering the vehicle, and it could be extremely dangerous to have that fail at an inopportune time. There's really not an opportune time for that to fail, but if you're like
no good time
going around a corner, you could crash and die.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So we got it all cleaned up, and we got it all ground down, and we prepared it, and we found a piece of material, a much thicker piece of material that was salvaged from an old trailer hitch. And it was probably Linus, 3/4 of an inch thick, something like that.
It was a pretty nice heavy duty piece of steel.
Yeah, and so we made
something normally Linus would have
Yeah.
squirred away in the back of his truck.
So we got that all prepared. We welded it in there, and we were like, this is gonna hold up better than what you had, but also you should probably leave immediately and drive very carefully and directly to a paved road, and then have it towed from there, because this is dangerous, and if the other side fails, you're going to be in a world of hurt, and I won't fix it. So
and you'll probably be dead. So not a big deal.
So we did that, and they decided after it was repaired to go ahead and continue and drive to the Springs, which is that long bumpy road that I was mentioning earlier. And so they show up at the Springs, and we're like, what are you doing? What are you doing here, man?
What are you doing? Wait.
And so the next day he leaves, and we don't think anything about it. And then the day after that, so he's been stuck 5 days at that point, right?
Yes.
5 days is stuck in the desert, and
Springs,
but he's mobile now. And so he stays at the Springs because he wanted to show his wife the Springs. And then he leaves, and we don't think anything about it. We carry on. We're having a good time. We're visiting with the musicians that have come, the musers that were playing in the
wandering desert musers.
Pretty much.
They were awesome.
They were awesome. They were great. And so we hung out with them. We did some hikes. We visited some cabins. We saw some cool stuff. And then we start leaving, and we get up to the snow line. What's there? An abandoned transit van. And they were stuck there for a day. They'd run out of supplies. Apparently, we found out later that they decided they were going to hike to the Springs, which is not recommended at all. It would take them.
It was like 30 miles.
Yeah.
They would have had to walk at least.
Yeah, they would have died.
And what was wrong with the van?
The other steering arm, which we warned them might fail, did in fact fail. And so they had to abandon their brand new transit van in the desert. And they still had to pay the $6,000 to have it towed out. Fortunately, they managed to get a ride with some people who happened by, but they waited an entire day before one person drove by.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so don't be like these people. Come prepared. And we
don't break yourself into jail. That's,
don't break yourself into jail.
Also, let's
Exactly.
clarify, don't be like that man
That man,
who is hopefully now divorced.
hopefully, I don't
or
think
dead, maybe. I mean, we don't know. Yeah, who
his
knows,
wife
right?
Probably
It
stabbed
could-
him, and rightfully so.
And that nowadays, and I suggest that anyone who even takes a back road sets themselves up with a full-size EcoFlow and a portable MIG welder, just in case, because you never know.
And
As
bring
I
somebody
have
who knows how to use it.
I have often been laughed at because I do bring a MIG welder with me occasionally on when we do the Southern California Rover Club thing. Always, because somebody always breaks something stupid. Everybody makes fun of me until we weld something back together. No joke, every weekend. Maybe we wouldn't have to if we didn't have a welder with us, but because we do, you never worry about it. So I don't bring anything else, though. I don't bring water or gasoline or supplies, a sleeping bag. I just bring the welder and the battery pack. And
Everyone's got their part.
That's all I need.
And so that was towards the end of our trip. We had
That's
a whole
true.
bunch of adventures before that. On the way into that area, my truck broke, and it's before we left. I noticed that sometimes when I would start the car, it was cranking a little slow, and I thought, I better do something about this before the trip. So we replaced the battery, and we had a rebuilt generator put that in.
Yeah.
As soon as we hit the dirt to go into Death Valley, the charge light comes on. So of all the things to break, the only part that broke on my Land Rover was the one that I put on before the trip. And I when I was replacing it at the shop, I said, well, the old one is still working. I'll bring it along as a spare.
Yeah.
And so I was able to leave the desert using the part that I had taken off originally. So
thankfully, at the
never know.
scrapyard, Ike was able to fashion you a new generator out of random desert bits. So no problem.
Out of a crashed B-29 Liberator.
There is a Lucas C40 generator in Saline Valley. Linus, do you remember where it is?
Yeah, it's at the beverage cabin.
Yep.
Isn't it? Yeah. There was a Smith's heater there too.
Yeah.
And some other stuff. They must have smashed up and disassembled some British car.
Now, speaking of mishaps, I saw a photo at some point.
No, you didn't.
It was perhaps your car, and it looked as though there was a hole in the ground that went to infinity underneath one of your.
We
one of
had
your
to test
tires.
how deep it was by placing a Land Rover inside it.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. So what was the story there? How did the ground open up and nearly swallow your car?
Well, I have a 109 Series 2, and Ike's got a 109 Series 2A, and he has a wider offset wheels, bigger tires.
Yeah.
I'm running G90s with 750 16s and the original rims. And we were going.
I can't imagine you would have it any other way, Linus.
No.
You don't even have to state that. Everybody knows that's already the case.
So, we're driving along this road, and there's a pretty big washout. And so Ike goes, straddles it with his car, and I go right behind him, attempting to straddle it, and it collapsed. And I sunk the driver's side down up to about the middle of the door, probably.
So he couldn't get out.
I couldn't get out. Yeah, I couldn't get out. And, that is the side of the Cambridge Expedition truck that was replaced one time in South America by a steel hand-built panel. And it's not really very well affixed to the structure of the car. So it sort of just bent in. And then when we got the car out, it just sprung back out again.
Yeah, perfect.
So that fortunately the damage to the car is very, very limited. We sort of added a few rumples to the already pretty rumpled sill panel.
Right.
But that needed to come off and get straightened and fixed anyway. So
Sure.
it didn't hurt the car too badly. And the frustrating part of it was that it was at such a steep angle that all of the hydraulic fluid in the tank like went to one side and the winch wouldn't work.
Oh no.
So that was real frustrating. But fortunately we had Ike's electric winch, which is always our go-to.
Yeah.
And we were trying to pull it sideways. We pulled the front sideways and we dug away the hill, and then we moved the doormobile around and pulled the back sideways and dug away the hill, and we were trying to set up how to winch it this way and that, and then we realized that it wasn't touching the hill anymore and we could just pull it straight backwards.
Just pull it straight backwards.
And Steve did that with his Defender, and it popped right out. So it probably set us back an hour, you know. And that was the second time that I got stuck in the Cambridge truck.
Yeah.
The other time we were doing one of those snow passes, and Ike's got a True Track in the front of his truck and the bigger tires, and he went right up it, and I made a pretty good attempt. We almost made it, but we slid. It was off camber, and we slid backwards down to the right, to the passenger side, and the tire was at I couldn't get out of there, so Ike winched me up. And then Brett tried to do the same thing, and he got even worse. He made it. He didn't get anywhere.
And he has a locker.
He has a locker, and
Oh.
he sunk down even deeper on the back passenger corner, and his front end was way up in the air. And when they winched him up, I think that front tire was about 3 feet off the ground. That thing was way up in the air. And
He definitely panicked a little.
he may have done a little body damage to the back corner, just a little in the sort of smushing it into the snow and mud and the bushes. But
I thought you were going to say he may have pooped a little.
He probably did.
I mean,
Probably also true, yeah.
I was going to try to not embarrass him, but he pooped a lot.
Well, Linus, that begs the question. Often on these trips, we like to get you to give a review of how much Land Rovering was had over the course of the trip. So it sounds like many of your favorite boxes have already been checked.
Yeah, we had
cars broke,
breaking, we had
winched.
being stuck, we had winching. Very little of it, though. I mean, a lot of it was just driving. And
did anyone run out of gas? I know that's a criteria.
No, we had a lot of fuel.
Okay.
We each of us brought 40 gallons.
Oh, wow.
And I have 2 saddle tanks and 4 jerry cans. I didn't ever use a jerry can.
How many times did we deploy the winch, Linus?
Let's see. We used it on garbage that we were moving around.
Yeah, you need that. Yeah.
We used it twice to pull me and Brett out of the snow. That's 3 times. Now, the time when I was in the ditch, is that one time? Because you repositioned and winched again.
It was
So
a
that's-
winching event.
So
yeah,
between,
I guess. I don't
so
know,
that's
right?
4
Yeah.
or possibly 5 times, and then we also winched Brett out of the sand.
That's true. That's 6 times.
So at least 6 times
At
that
least
we
6
used the
times.
winch.
Well, and can we add to that? We also attempted to use the hydraulic winch twice, and Brett
Right.
unspooled his winch at one
Right.
went to unspool it,
It
only
didn't
to realize he didn't
work.
have the woodruff key.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah, so
Right.
almost as many winch
Forgot the
attempts
windows.
as
We needed-
successful winch deploying. I mean, this is a good ratio.
Yeah.
I think that's even more Land Rovering when you
Yes.
try the winch and the winch does not work.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And you just
Yeah.
you can't winch. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're
At one
right.
point,
That
we
seems
had-
about right.
Didn't
Yeah.
we have 2 cables deployed though? Because we had Linus's cable
We did.
attached.
Yeah,
to
one was too
Brett,
short.
And
Yeah.
then
Oh,
we
yeah,
had the
There's a joke there, but I'm not going to.
the electric winch attached to the side or something. Like there was a whole triangulation of winches going.
Yeah.
There's lots of calculations. We had like a whole matrices,
Do you remember
It was-
that? There's that meme of the lady with like all the math around her head, like angles and
yes.
that's kind of.
It's a
that's what we were
beautiful
doing.
mind every
It's a
time somebody
beautiful
tries to
mind,
move
exactly.
a Land Rover out there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We did a lot
Lots
of
of
digging.
shoveling.
There was a lot
Yeah.
of shoveling
Yeah.
under
Okay, good.
cars.
Which brings
lot
up a good rule of travel. Always bring 2 shovels. Otherwise, you dig alone.
Otherwise, you dig alone.
We
We
did
are
a-
going to get to making that T-shirt. Yeah,
We haven't even talked about camels yet. How much time do we have?
Oh, we're running short on time. It's I think it's time to get to the camels. In fact, I know a lot of people are tuning in specifically for the camel.
So there we were driving Land Rovers, and we drove through a very small town which is renowned for its lithium mine.
This is after driving down the steepest hill I have ever driven down in a Land Rover.
Sorry.
Oh, good.
That was my bad.
Yeah. Well,
Jenna was routing us down this canyon, and she took us through this mining area.
It's
Holes and
near Blair.
It's
The
near
ghost
Blair,
Blair.
Nevada, and we descended this just incredibly steep series of very dangerous switchback roads, and it was like loose gravel, and there was like a little bit of frosty snow, and it was incredibly
Everything in the
dangerous.
car like rolls forward and comes into the driver's compartment and
Yeah, I had,
pushes
like-
you up against the steering wheel.
All my camping gear was like displayed across the windshield, and I'm just like pushing against the floorboard to like stay back away.
The dog
from
was
the-
in the back seat, and she had her front feet like on my back.
And every passenger was holding the transmission and transfer case in the gears that they were selected for. 'Cause
right. Yes.
If
Yes.
it popped out, that was the end.
Yeah,
That
you
was
were,
it.
you were going to
Tumbling
die for
down.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
You were
where our
gonna die
dog
for
was.
sure.
She was wedged in there.
Yeah, we used the
Holding
dog.
on.
We wedged her in between the bulkhead and the transfer case.
Oh,
She
it
loved
makes
it.
it harder to come out of gear. Yeah, no, that's a good call.
So we
Yeah, that's a
get
good
down out of this crazy mining area, and we get to like a paved road, and we're like, okay, we're gonna drive through this small town. And,
Oh, we could see it from
Yeah,
the
you
from
could
the
see
top of those steep hills. I looked down. We all
We
did.
came out of the mining area and we came across Blair, which was a cool thing
Yeah.
in and of itself.
Yeah, it could have been a big mine, and it kind of is a big mine. So there's a mining area that used to be called Blair, and it had thousands of people that live there, but it's largely been scoured. They've bulldozed all the buildings. There's a few large industrial structures that remain, and
The foundations, anyway.
foundations. It's a cool area to explore. But outside of that is the town of Silver Peak, and it is known for its large lithium mine. And pretty much everyone that lives in the town works at the
cancer.
mine,
sorry.
works at this lithium mine. But it's cancer. Has
What you
cancer,
said.
probably. But it's a very old area, and it was founded like in the 1860s, 1870s, something like that. It's a sort of a gold boom town, but only about 100 people live there in this town. And previously, it was much larger. So there's some ruined buildings. There's some abandoned buildings. There's some, just relics of the mining era that have found their way to this place, along with heavy equipment, heavy industrial stuff that is there for the current mining boom that's happening there. And there's a bunch of small houses, and so you're driving through this town, and you're looking at all these mining relics and all these like old ruins of stone buildings, and you're kind of checking it out. And there's a bar called the Old School Tavern or something of that ilk. There's a lot of hand painted signs in the town that are like Las Vegas that way, and like slow the fuck down, and like they're just like a lot of hand painted stuff. So you're like looking at all this stuff.
There's a lot of artists in there.
And
A
then
lot of really good
Definitely.
artists.
so you're just kind of peering around, and we're looking, and we're sort of supposed to make a turn, and I kind of look at the town, and I'm like, we need to take a circuit through this town because it's a really interesting place. And we drive maybe a block, and we get to what's essentially a zoo in the middle of town. It's like 3 feet from the road, and there's like llamas and emus and alpacas
Pigs.
and giant camels. Giant Bactrian camels, the ones with 2 humps. So
Oh,
they're
yeah.
like furry, and they're agitated, and they're just like, and we're like, we gotta see what's going on there.
Angry camels. Yeah.
And so Jenna and Maddi spearhead the effort to visit the camels and find their owner.
Well, first we were a little apprehensive to just roll in on this guy,
Well,
unannounced.
originally we went to the post office, as you should always do in a new town where you're exploring.
yeah.
You go to the post office and you ask, can I talk to the man who owns the camels?
Yeah, naturally. Any town you go into, that's the first question you ask at the post office. Yeah, makes sense. Yep.
Yeah, and the post lady was very nice. She was like, "Oh yeah, that's Junior. He's a talker. But I'm sure, he'd love to show you. I think he's home. You should, go over there and knock."
So we attempted that.
Yeah.
we walked over. We had to go through the gate, which was a little scary,
And
considering
protected.
the animals that were in there.
Right.
And
Oh,
we
yeah,
knocked
yeah.
on what appeared to be the door of the home,
But the door was like 2.5 feet above grade, and there were no steps going up to it.
and it seemed to be just full of plants. And so
It's a greenhouse.
we didn't get an answer. And so
Right.
we regrouped and we said, you know what? We're not going to give up. We're going to figure this out. There are other homes on this property.
Right.
Homes,
Yes.
quote unquote.
Let's go check this out. And so we walked up to the next home
The first trailer that they came across.
and we knocked on the door, and all we could hear was bird noise. So much bird noise coming from inside. And a man says, didn't he say something like,
Let's say for the
Trap.
sake of interesting podcasting
It was
that it was
definitely-
a bird.
and this tall man comes to the door and he opens it up and he says, what do you want? And Jenna and I both look at each other because we clearly haven't thought out what we're going to say at this moment. And I think Jenna said,
We like camels.
basically, she said, we were driving by and the lady at the post office said that you weren't mean and that if we came over, maybe we could see your camels. And he said, of course, come in. And immediately invited us into the bird cacophony, which obviously we had to say yes to.
The bird
So
trailer.
so this building adjacent to his house, which is in fact a mobile home, a vintage, but not necessarily cool mobile home.
Vintage, but not in a good
Not in
way.
a cool way.
Yeah, right.
But other than the fact that it turns out it is just full of birds. It is the bird house. It is all birds, large birds, small birds.
Just
Most
immediately.
people, when they hear the phrase birdhouse, they think of a birdhouse, not a 40-foot long trailer full of birds.
This was a bird home.
It was.
A bird apartment
This was a bird
complex.
home.
It's good that he's a gracious host. You invite somebody in. Do you want anything? Here's a bird. Can I get you a drink?
Oh, thank
a
you.
bird, maybe. Yeah. Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, he had cockatiels.
Oh, yeah, of
He
course.
had
Cockatoos.
macaws.
Oh.
He had what looked like an African gray. It seems that he has adopted a lot of these
I see.
from different people who couldn't care for them.
Right.
And the bird that he handed me was a large white cockatoo,
Uh-huh.
and which was immediately just like coming up like real close to my face, and he was like, "The bird's gonna go for your nose ring." Was the first
Oh.
thing that he said, and I was like,
That's why I handed
Okay.
it to you.
"Yeah."
Yeah.
The bird was nice and didn't go for my nose ring.
Oh, good.
But
Oh,
we have a lot
nice.
of really great photos of me and my sweet bird friend who I miss.
And
every day.
now you own that bird.
I
so,
wish.
Yeah. I brought
I
the
wish.
bird home. And,
If I could leave Linus for Junior,
The man with the
man.
birds.
Oh, with the bird.
That was
Oh,
that
no.
was the tip of the iceberg. We met.
That was
we
the
Nice
tip of
bird.
the iceberg.
We subsequently met all
The
of the
emus.
animals.
Oh,
The
excellent.
pig
I would
named
love to
Arnold that
know-
got run over by a truck.
Ike and Linus, what were your thoughts when we went into that trailer?
Quick, drive away.
We were in there for about 10, 15 minutes. We were in there for a
He's
long time.
definitely eating them.
I was going to say their faces have already been eaten.
Mhm.
It's
I
right
wasn't-
off at this point. Yeah.
I wasn't necessarily paying close attention because you guys had made several attempts to reach the owner of the property. And I was sort of resigned to the fact that you might not find them. So I was like watching the animals or fiddling with the Land Rover or something. And I turned around and you guys were just gone. And I asked Linus, I was like, what happened to them? Where'd they go? And he's like, I don't know. They went inside that trailer house full of birds or something.
This tracks. Yeah.
Yeah, I think at one point we were in the trailer house full of birds with Junior, and Junior's going on and on and on about birds and the history of all the birds. And I'm like, this is great, but we should probably go back outside so the boys don't think we, disappeared. And he's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. Do you think the boys want to see the camels
These
too?
birds
And
are
I'm like,
great
"Yep."
and all, but let's get to the fucking camels, all right? That's what we're here for. So
I will say
yeah.
Junior was an amazingly gracious host.
He was
and
awesome.
one of my favorite people that we met on the trip. He
Super
had
nice
a heart
fellow.
of gold.
He told us all about the history of every camel on the property. There were 3.
Mhm.
And he gave us like the whole rundown of where they came from, how he got interested in camels. It was really what you might call a real camel
Cool.
trophy.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
he's very excited, very enthusiastic about camels, and he's raised several, and he has 2 female camels and a male camel. And the male camel at this particular time was extremely agitated, and he was in a pen by himself, and he was kept there because apparently it was his his time to be extremely agitated and interested in the female camels.
Oh,
And so he was just pacing the entire time and blowing foam and spraying foam and just you can picture a camel that's just about ready to jump out of its enclosure and murder everyone. That was this camel.
Murder camel. Yeah, it makes
Murder
sense.
camel.
Makes sense.
But not because he was mad at you, but because you were between him and the female camel.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Right?
He also showed us the house that they had initially knocked on that was full of plants. He has a green thumb, this guy. Every plant in there was there wasn't a brown leaf, maybe one or two, but there was 40 or 50 big plants in there, and they were all kinds of just interesting house plants,
weed.
and
just 100% weed. Yeah.
Maybe a little,
but there were some.
But
he expounded on how much he actually really enjoys growing weed, but he does not enjoy using weed. And so he's like, I just love it. It's just such a beautiful plant, and I just have jars.
It's the best kind of friend.
Give
the
it away
camels,
for Christmas.
that Junior was not that kind of guy.
No.
He was just a really good person. And
You talked to Junior for maybe 10 minutes. He's a kooky guy that lives in the desert in a zoo.
I don't know. I think we got a pretty good read on him in that time.
Yeah, he was pretty great.
One
fun thing about the camels, one of the camels was named Eileen because one of her humps leans.
Honey camel name. God. Oh, I take it back. Junior is a monster. My God.
Oh, we forgot to talk about the Clown Motel.
Oh, yeah.
Did you forget?
The Clown Motel. Yeah. We may have to make that a Patreon exclusive, the Clown Motel. I've seen some of the photos from that. That is.
Yeah. In Tonopah, Nevada, there's a motel dedicated to the idea that clowns are fun instead of scary.
Well, and it's a one-stop shop because right
shop.
next to it is the Tonopah Cemetery, where you can read about
10 feet
all
away.
of the different pioneer folks and miners who lived there and died. And
some of them may have been clowns. You never know. Every
Every grave has the cause of death of the person who died.
What were some of the highlights on that?
There was a new one with my name on it that said "Bored to Death" by Linus. And concerning, but
Life became a burden.
there were a lot of life
sad.
became a burden. A lot of mine deaths, a lot of impaled by shovel handles, and
Blown up, shot by the sheriff. Was the sheriff and became shot by somebody else. Many really a great cemetery. Very,
That's a great read.
Very well researched grave sites and well marked.
And I just
very
can't emphasize
old.
enough how close it is to that clown motel.
Very close to
One-stop
one
shop.
motel. We saw a great deep caldera of hot water in the top of a hill and went swimming in some real greasy mud down below that.
Saw that. Yeah. The great photos there.
Yeah, I'd like to hear Ike's thoughts on that since he did not partake.
It was too greasy for Ike.
So there's
surprising.
this geologic feature, and remind me the name of it.
It's called Diana's Punch Bowl.
Diana's Punch Bowl.
We visited it on the rally.
And so Jenna wanted to show us this feature, and from a distance, it just looks like a hill. It looks like a hill, unremarkable in every way. You look off, and there's hundreds of hills, but this particular one has a very deep cylindrical depression in the center of it. So it looks like, when you come up close, a tiny volcano, because it's got this sort of caldera looking pit, and there's steam coming out of it and whatnot. It does look like a tiny volcano. It's pretty really actually a neat feature, and you can kind of drive up to the edge of it, and people have rappelled down and placed little plastic pink flamingos as a joke sort of thing. But it's an impressive geologic feature. And so we were considering camping nearby. And so we were kind of spread out looking for a spot to camp. And Linus and Maddi found this pit of disgusting ooze that
we found Diana's butthole.
And, they nicknamed Diana's butthole that basically was part of a creek. And at various points in the creek, the cold water ran through the geologic feature, and some warm water was welling up into the creek, making like a hot pool area. And so these idiots all decided to get into that. And it was basically like this volcanic sludge, like almost like a silt that was all hot mud. And so
it's
they were like
in the bottom of your oil pan.
Yeah.
You know, when it's full of sludge, it's kind of like if moisture gets in your oil and you get that milky, nasty oil sludge in the bottom. Just imagine that, but it's biological material instead of
no, it's all arsenic.
And it's like
covers
it's
your,
like 3 feet deep. You just sink down into it.
And so they're all like,
wallowing,
undressed, wallowing around in this muck, and it was
squirming, ooching
and squirming, and they're all disgusting, and they look like a bunch of hippies.
Were we more disgusting in there than usual, or less?
More, because you had the same amount of grossness on you, and then you added grossness on top of that. So it was definitely more. And so I just
had a puke bag the whole time he was sitting there watching.
But he was sitting there watching us.
But he was sitting
That's
there
the
watching.
thing.
Right. Good times. Well,
I'm surprised we didn't find any skeletal remains down in the bottom of that muck. Honestly.
Oh man, there's been, there's a number of Pangolin man owners in there. You'll never find them. That's it.
I've noticed there's like a chat window to the side of our podcast as we're podcasting, and Liza is typing in there, and she has just suggested that we need some Max tracks. And I realized why she said that. And it's so we can sit on them in that hot spring.
Yes. That's right. Yeah. It's like the
That would be
beaded
a
seat.
great
That,
use.
it's like the beaded seats they used to have in
It
taxis.
has enough surface area that it won't sink. It's designed to sit on top.
It'll get you slightly perforated so you can absorb a little more of that wonderful stuff that's down in there. It's therapeutic.
You just got to make sure to put the pokey side down.
Well, or pokey side up, depending on your persuasion, however you want to lay on a Max track, that's up to you. Well, at that, speaking of the pokey side up, something that we, ask of all of our new guests, of course, Jenna and Linus have run this gauntlet, if you will, many, many times. But Steve and Maddi, being new guests of the show, it is required by Underpowered Our Law and His Royal Majesty's decree that you must answer the Ike Goss lightning round questions.
It's true.
Known to be the most difficult set of Land Rover based questions out of any Land Rover podcast, as it's also the only set. But by nature,
I was
that's
unaware of those. I am not a listener, so
no, I don't blame you. No, most aren't.
I have never been subjected to the lightning round. I have never gone through.
Is that true?
It's true.
Oh my God!
But I have listened to it so many times that I feel like I'd be cheating.
Linus is a de facto co-host, and I guess he somehow skipped out of that. But Ike, at that, take it away for what is again the world's most difficult set of lightning round Land Rover.
Because you have maybe not heard this before, this is a series of short Land Rover related questions and quick answers. So we're trying to get to the bottom of your enthusiasm for Land Rovering and exactly what your preferences are. So this is sort of like speed dating, but with Land Rovers, if that makes sense. Are you ready for this?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to do it anyway.
Okay. Hit me.
All right. Gas or diesel?
Diesel.
Soft top or hard top?
Hard top.
Coils or leaves?
Oh, that's going to be hard for me. Leaves.
Yes. Bronze green or Tangiers orange?
Bronze green.
And the best way to remove gear oil from your underpants?
Brake cleaner.
That's a good,
I like how you didn't say remove them first.
No, never.
But you don't need to.
Never.
That's the best part about brake cleaner.
Just evaporates.
It just goes right
fresh
away.
feeling.
Yeah, stuff's incredible.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right, Linus and Maddi, are you ready?
Yes, Maddie's got to put her earpiece back in.
Maddi, so if you haven't heard before, I know you're not a listener, and I also know that you aren't a reader either, but
that's one of my resolutions. I'm learning this year. So
Yes.
2023 is going to be my year.
we're going to do a series of short questions and very brief responses. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Question 1. Gas or diesel?
Greasel.
Greasel. Good answer. That's correct. Hard top or a soft top?
I told you that's a thing that happens to every guy. Hard top.
Also correct.
Sure.
Also correct. Now, leaf springs or coil springs?
I'm going to have to say leaf springs.
Leaf
Oh, yeah,
springs.
good.
Ooh, nice.
Thanks, honey. Good job.
Bronze green or Tangier's orange?
I'm going to have to go with the orange.
Oh!
I'm sure it's the
Sorry,
wrong
Linus.
answer.
Oh, no. No, it's the rightest of right answers.
Is that the ugly car?
Yeah, it's so good.
It's the one you like.
It's the best color. It's the best color.
All right. And the final question, the best way to remove gear oil from your underpants?
I'd probably just do what he does and leave my underwear at your house like he does.
Not always intentional.
Wow.
Fine.
You got them all right.
Perfect score.
Perfect.
Well, it has been nothing but a delight to have you all chatting this afternoon, evening. And Steve, I hope you'll come back and join us at some point in the future. We'll talk more about all those fleet of no. And Maddi, of course, you are always welcome. We appreciate it. We appreciate your tolerance of Linus. Somebody's got to do it, and
yeah, I won't be back.
yeah, we're glad it's none of us. Now, if you all want to, and anyone listening wants to continue the conversation, head on over to our Facebook group, the hottest group on Facebook, no question. We've got all kinds of great stuff. People have been sharing their collections of Land Rovers there all week. Some super cool stuff. Really,
from around
really
the world.
Around
Germany,
the world.
Netherlands, England, a lot of cool trucks from a
Super
lot of
cool stuff.
listeners. It's cool to see.
We're racking up quite a list of folks that you guys will have to visit in person in Australia. So I'll start making up a list for you. I hear it's not that big of a country, though, so it shouldn't be a big deal. You guys can just quickly pop in and say hello to everyone. Again, thanks for joining us. We are on the eve of the 100th episode of the Underpowered Hour. Who would have imagined
No one would think.
that we would have been able to actually get our shit together 100 consecutive times and put out this show. So we'll see what comes next week. Big things planned. Guests, special prizes. Maybe a camel or two. Who knows? There's no way to know.
I would like to shamelessly, as is said, state the name of the band that we ran across in Salem Valley. In case anybody is interested. 3 nice ladies and 1 man. They are the Musers Band on Instagram. Musers, Musers. The
Excellent.
Musers Band. Very fun, sort of folky, bluegrassy, and they write a lot of their own lyrics, and they're very fun. So,
did you do a banjo sit-in with them at all?
No, I did not bring a banjo to the desert.
But they are coming.
They're coming to our
Oregon.
house. They're going to play. So they're doing a tour
in July.
and they're going to do a house concert.
Well, we got to get that. That sounds like a live stream or something for sure. Well, at that, it has been or something. Yeah, it has been a pleasure, and again, we appreciate you guys coming on, and look forward to tales from the next desert journey whenever that may come. So, Steve and Maddi and Linus, Jenna, and Ike, as always, thanks for everything, and we'll see you guys next week.
See you on the trail,
Bye.
Stephen.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Underpowered Hour is produced by Liza Barris, Ike Goss, and me, Steve Barris. Pavel Svardov composed and performed our theme music. Consider supporting the show on Patreon, and if you already do, thank you. Your support makes the show possible. For even more, check out our Instagram or Facebook.